Today, we have a unique individual. He's an individual that has been training for marathons, ultra marathons, is a triathlete, has competed in thousands of races, and he has competed in 12 Ironman triathlons. But that's not what's impressive to me. What's impressive to me is working through addictions, working through mental health, and then becoming a peak performer in life. And so today we're here to talk with Tim Davis about how he did that and about his new book coming out, Tripolar, which I really liked it from, triathlete and bipolarism, and how he's incorporated this into his life in the healing that he walks in based off of the lessons that he has learned. So, Tim, welcome to the Whole Person Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show, Evan. This is awesome. I'm glad to be here and try and share some of my experience, strength, and hope with people.
Well, perfect. Just give us a background, your life, your upbringing, and your journey.
All right. Well, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but we moved when I was 3, and we kind of moved around a little bit, but we ended up settling in West Virginia. So I did most of my child rearing in West Virginia. I'm the third oldest of 7 kids, big Catholic family. And discipline came with the firm, heavy hand. My dad had his belt. My mom had her Lester Maddox hickory stick. And they kept us in line. And we certainly did our chores and mostly behaved. Although my oldest sister hardly ever got in trouble. My older brother, he was 4 years older than me. He was kind of the rebel. And I was 4 years younger than him. And when he was in middle school, age 12, he started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And I was the next youngest. I was his little brother's buddy. And he let me do whatever he was doing. So at age 8, I had my first drink. At age 9, I had my first hit of weed. And, we just did it here and there, maybe once or twice a month, until I got a little older. At age 13, our dad fell off the balcony at our house in this tragic accident. And he was actually playing chase with me. And I was like, ha, 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 I'm going to get you. I ran out of the balcony and ran down the other end and back in the other entry into the house. And he did not make the right turn back in the house and went end over, landed headfirst in our driveway below his 2-story balcony. And that was crazy. He ended up being in a coma for 9 months before he died.
Wow.
And my older brother blamed me for my dad's death. And at age 13, I thought it was my fault. And that's when I really started, looking to drink and use drugs every chance I got because I didn't have any other coping mechanisms. My mom never thought therapy for any of us or herself because she would say the only therapy she needs is her Catholic priest. Any of us knew it was a Catholic priest. And I wasn't getting the kind of healing I really needed from just going to the confessional and confessing my sins at age 13. So I kind of lost my way. I stopped believing in God. At that point, I became agnostic and maybe even atheist. I often claimed I was atheist because I just felt like if there was a God, why would he do this to me and our family? And it would be several years later at age 27 when I was in like my 3rd rehab, when I was working the 12 steps and, the steps 1, 2, and 3 in the 12-step program are kind of really helping you figure out if you do believe in a God, what kind of God is it? Even though the 12-step program is open to everybody and there are many atheists who also work the 12-step program to stay sober. I found a God of my understanding because I just came to realize that if there was a creator of the universe, and it certainly wasn't me, so I believe in a creator of the universe. Not so much the Jesus that was kind of shoved on me as a kid when I was forced to be an altar boy for 8 years and go to Catholic school, but that's just where I found my spirituality. But it took me a while to get there. Through my teens, after my dad's death, I started drinking and using drugs to basically escape any kind of painful feelings. It was the only coping mechanism I knew. And I got lost with drugs and alcohol for almost 20 years. It wasn't until I had kids at age 25 that I realized that, whoa, I got to get my stuff together. I can't keep drinking and smoking weed and doing other drugs, pretty much every day. Now that I got little guys to take care of. And that's kind of when the SHIT hit the fan because, the shoe dropped out from underneath me and, I had to take a good look in the mirror and I wasn't ready. It took about 5 years. I went in and out of about a half a dozen rehabs. And kind of my modus operandum was to, get sober for maybe 30, 60, 90 days, a couple times, even 6 months. And then my disease, my alcoholism and my addiction disease would be like, well, you've been sober for so long now, you could probably just have one drink or one hit of weed. And it was never just one drink or one hit of weed. I mean, once I took one drink or one hit, it was off to the races and I was doing it all day, every day. And I'd lose jobs because I'd stop showing up to work and start getting in trouble because I wasn't meeting all my responsibilities. I did a lot of irresponsible things. Wasn't until 33 when I finally, well, at age 30, I got sober for 3 years and I had one more 2-month relapse. But at age 33, I finally got sober and have stayed sober since then. And now I have 13 years and
How old are
like
you
8
now?
months. I'm 46 now.
Okay.
I got 13 and a half years sober by the grace of God and the higher power that I understand, through working the 12 steps, through staying med compliant with my bipolar medications, because I was diagnosed bipolar at age 27. But again, like alcoholism and addiction, the denial there is really big. And I did not want to believe I had bipolar disorder at age 27. I was really angry. And I was thinking, again, if there's a God, why is he giving me one more thing to have to deal with? I'm already struggling just trying to learn how to get sober. And now I'm bipolar too. And for me at the time, I didn't know anything about mental health. I just thought that meant I was crazy. So that's why it made me mad, because I didn't think I was crazy. Now I know a lot more because I've read a lot of books and articles and done research about bipolar disorder. There's a lot of famous people who suffer from bipolar disorder but have gotten recovery because they stay on their meds, they see their psychiatrist regularly, and do other things to take care of themselves. And basically that's what I learned to do when I get sober, is to learn how to take care of the mind, body, and spirit. I take care of the mind by, going to see my psychiatrist regularly, taking care of, taking my meds and staying educated. I take care of the spirit by going to my 12-step meetings, working the steps, sponsoring guys in the program, and working all the principles of the 12 steps, which are same as the principles in the Bible. And then I take care of the body, which I learned to start doing about 1.5 years sober, when I was really overweight. I was 250 pounds and I'm only 5'8". So I kind of, made a commitment. Like, you're pre-diabetic, at this rate, you're going to hit 300, you're going to be obese. So I just made a commitment to stop eating seconds, start exercising every day. And I would not allow myself to watch TV or play video games and basically be a couch potato until I've done at least an hour of exercise each day. And I've been doing that ever since January 1st, 2009 for, I guess, 12 and a half years now. If I'm doing my math right, something like that. That's when I got into running and triathlons and all that other stuff that you were talking about.
So I have several questions that come from that.
Mm-hmm.
You said you were 7 when your dad went over the balcony.
I was 13 when he fell over the balcony.
Oh, 13. Okay.
I was 8
Gotcha.
when I had my first drink.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you blame yourself?
Yes, I did. Because the night that the accident happened, my older brother and sister, they were like a senior in high school and a freshman in college, and they weren't home. He was at his job and she was living in the dorm or whatever. And my mom went to the hospital with them, and me and my younger sister were left home to put my 3 baby brothers to bed. And my 3 baby brothers were really little. They were age 2, 3, and 5. So we got them to bed, and then we cried a lot and we settled down. But then my brother came home around 2 or 3 in the morning, and he proceeded to rip me out of my bed and give me one of the worst beatings I've ever had in my life, for about like almost 2 hours. He was just pounding on me everywhere. Almost put me in the hospital that night. And he was just like using all kinds of cuss words, saying, it's your effing fault that dad's going to die. How could you effing do that? You effing idiot, and it was a really, rough time. So I really did think it was my fault, because I should have known better. I know that my dad had been drinking that day, and I shouldn't have gone out on the balcony. I just, I internalized it. It took me years of therapy and working the 12 steps to realize that it wasn't my fault. It just was an accident,
Yeah.
And I was just a kid, I didn't push him. So.
Right. My heart breaks for the 13-year-old you. It really does. Going on from that to your dad passing, and even the alcohol and drugs, and then bipolarism, there's something that you said that I want to ask you a few questions on. Both times I noticed that you said, well, why would God give this to me? And my question to you is, if you were agnostic in your beliefs, then why would you look at God as the source of those problems?
I think because, I've always been a math and science guy. I'm a science teacher now. I've been a science teacher for 20 years. And just I was always a doubting Thomas. I had to see things to believe them. If you're familiar with the Bible, there's the doubting Thomas story. And that was definitely me. And so I just doubted, that kind of thing. And I also believe, anything that couldn't be explained by science must be explained by God or whatever higher power you believe in. That's where God comes in, the things that science can't explain. So that's kind of why I guess I was placing that blame on God, because I didn't feel like science could explain it.
That makes sense. I understand. Well, especially
Yeah.
when you, as an individual, you're hurt and broken, and a lot of that I think comes to not knowing how to handle the situation because we as humans aren't equipped to handle stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It takes going through it to learn, and that was exactly the process that you had to go through. Tell me about this process of denial with bipolarism because you didn't want to admit that you had it and you wanted to pretend that it wasn't there, which probably made things worse.
Yeah, I learned through trial and error and from my psychiatrist and reading and studying that I'd basically been self-medicating my bipolar disorder for years. And when I look back on it myself as a kid, from ever since I can remember, age 5, I was always an anxious kid, and I just felt insecure, felt like inferiority complex, like I wasn't as good as the other kids. I always felt like I was never good enough. And, I didn't realize it at the time. I just, looking back, maybe before I got into therapy and recovery, maybe I was just insecure. But now I know that I was dealing with anxiety my whole childhood. And people with bipolar, they deal with anxiety, depression, racing thoughts, impulsivity, which I have all those things. And I'd start taking my meds after I got, diagnosed bipolar, and those things would start to go away, or they would happen less. And then they maybe wouldn't even happen at all. And then I'd think I was cured, and then I would stop taking my meds, and then those symptoms would come back. And most of the times I went off my meds, I would start, relapse and self-medicate with drugs and alcohol up until the last time, and then now I stay on my meds because I don't want to have as much anxiety and depression and racing thoughts and impulsivity and the other things that go along with being bipolar, because my life is too crazy when I have that stuff going on. I have a lot of relationship problems and just all kinds of problems, so I basically got tired of getting in trouble. So I do what the doctor says now instead of trying to be my own doctor anymore.
Right. I had a unique experience this year. I actually got diagnosed with anxiety, severe anxiety, and depression, which blew my mind because I'm not someone who has a doom and gloom outlook. I'm actually really positive. And so I didn't realize that there's many different facets to depression and anxiety. And I can't say this for everyone. This is me specific.
Mm-hmm.
But with talking to the doctor, it was the first time I met him. And apparently a part of, because I was doing a physical, mental health checkup. And apparently I failed the mental test, which is never good to hear. He told me he wanted to put me on meds. And I didn't know if it was chemical or a mental thing that I had trained my brain in from a young age. And so I decided for myself, before I go down the medicine route, I'm going to work on my mind. And so I went through counseling, and this podcast has severely been an amazing impact in my life with talking to people who study the brain and self-talk and stuff like that. For you, what do you feel like some of the turning points was going through your 12-step program that what changed in you from failure of relapsing and failing in the 12-step programs to actually hitting sobriety and seeing some success?
Well, long story short, I did what they say in rehabs and 12-step rooms is I basically got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had hit several bottoms, and one of them I almost killed my baby brother in a drunk driving accident. Well, I was on a lot of methamphetamine, and then I passed out, and we crashed the car. I crashed the car. I was driving, and that was the first time I realized, I was around age 27, 28, that my drinking and using drugs could actually hurt somebody else. Up until that point, I basically wanted everybody to get off my back because, what I'm doing is only hurting myself. It's not hurting anybody else. So don't worry about me, And then not long after that, I got into another bottom where I ended up, burning through a bunch of money, got kicked out of house. I was kind of homeless, living out of my car, and I finally ended up back in rehab. And my therapist, he took me to this funeral of a good buddy of his who had 15 years sober, and then he lapsed and died a week later from an overdose. And my sponsor at the time basically said, he took me back to my rehab, and he's like, look around the room, all these other people that have newly checked in this rehab, you guys are all just a bunch of dead men walking. And he's like, you can go on doing what you're doing, and you can die from this disease. And you know what? Your wife and your kids will be sad, but eventually she'll find another man to be her husband and the father to your children. And when he told me that, that just really hit me. I'm like, I got this disease that can kill me, and I don't want it to take me out like it took my dad out. And I don't want anybody else to replace me as the husband to my wife or the father to my children. And that's kind of when I just made a deal with the God that I understand. And I just said, God, I'm going to, work through all 12 of these steps. And if I get to step 12 and I still want to drink or use drugs, then I'm going to go ahead and, get high or drunk or whatever. And I also, at that point, committed to doing a year of sober living, because I had been through several rehabs. And every time I got out of rehab, they were like, you should go to sober living, before you go back home, so you can really get, a strong foundation. And I always kind of rushed back home feeling like I needed to be there to help take care of the kids and be the man of the house and all that kind of stuff, even though I was not emotionally and mentally ready for that. And, as somebody newly sober and just raw emotionally and emotionally immature. Because there's this thing I learned in rehab and therapy that basically, whatever age you start drinking and using drugs, until you finally get sober, your emotional maturity is basically that age. So until I got sober, finally sober at age 33, I was basically as emotionally mature as some kid between 8 and 13 years old, as far as my emotional maturity and IQ went. So it took a long time being sober, and I ended up working through all 12 steps. And you keep working through the 12 steps when after you go through them once, you just go through them again. You keep cycling through. And it was about halfway through the 12 steps when I was lifted. I didn't feel like drinking anymore, and I started thinking about getting high or drunk every day. Now it's just a passing thought every once in a while, but I kind of have this tape player in my head that says, what'll happen if you have just one? The bets are off. I'll go to the wheels fall off, and things will get bad real fast. So I'm like, no, that's not a good idea. Let's do something else. So now I go to my 12-step meetings. I go exercise. I breathe. I meditate. I be of service to my family and my community. Just do other stuff, to get me out of my own head. I talk to people on the phone.
Yeah. Part of your story, something I noticed that you said a couple of times, is the God that I know. Mm-hmm. You emphasize that you grew up Catholic and that you were an altar boy for 8 years, and that you don't believe in the Jesus that was shoved down your throat. Tell me, because I'm one who does believe in Jesus. Do you not believe in Jesus altogether, or do you believe in Jesus in a different way than what you were taught? Because you started referencing other scriptures, so I'm just curious, where are you at spiritually in your own journey?
Yeah. That's an awesome question. I'm glad you asked that. For me, where I'm at spiritually in my journey, and I think, my journey along the way as far as religion versus spirituality is, when people ask me what religion I am, I usually just say I'm a spiritualist. And for me, when I say God as I understand, when I was in college, I had a few different other non-denominational Christian type groups try to kind of recruit me to join their church. And I just felt like I was being proselytized by them. Even at one point, my older sister was like this born again Christian. And she basically told me if I don't accept Jesus Christ as my savior, I'm going to go to hell. And I was just like, so only Christians get to go to heaven? And in my head, I'm like, what about the Buddhists, the Jews, the Muslims, all the other faiths out there? Just because they don't accept Christ as their savior, that means they don't get to go to heaven. So I just had a lot of big problems with that, because for me, the God that I understand, like, I think as long as you live a good life and try to do more good than you do bad, and we're all human, we make mistakes, but if you try to live a good life and be good most of the time, and when you make mistakes, you make amends for them, I think God's going to let everybody into heaven, whether you believe in Allah or Buddha or whoever, Yahweh. So that was kind of my issue with, I guess, Christianity or Catholicism, feeling like Jesus was the only path to heaven, when there's like half the world that believes in other things, and I think we all just believe in some God or something that created the universe, because we know we didn't do it. We're just human beings. So that's kind of my thing on all that.
No worries. Well, I'm glad that you answered this. And I think, right now is a perfect example of what can absolutely be wrong in our society because I disagree. You and I had different viewpoints,
Hmm.
and that's okay. And when we get into discussions like this, I often find it gets heated, it gets hurtful because one person has to win and one person has to be right. And in so doing, you lose connection and relationship. And so, because part of the whole person is, we're talking about faith, we're talking about family, finances, friendship. When you get into the point with friendship where you lose connection and relationship over differences, how has that affected your walk and your journey in relationships with others, whether it be through drugs or alcohol or the differences of spiritual beliefs?
Well, in the 12 steps and just, principles, three, the biggest principles behind the 12 steps are being honest, open-minded, and having willingness. And so I just try to be open-minded about things. I have, friends and family that, Jesus, they believe in Jesus, and that's their, path to God and the spirituality that works for them. And, we get along great, and they respect me and where I'm coming from because they know where I used to be. I was a lost soul when I was out there using drugs and alcohol, and they're like much happier to see me being healthy, productive, showing up for work every day, being a good father and husband and all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't do that by myself. I couldn't get sober by myself. So, whatever God there is out there, I think that God is there for everybody, whatever you want to call him. So, if Jesus works for you, I respect that. I love all the people who love Jesus. It's just, I know it doesn't work for everybody because we're a world planet of probably 8 billion people by now. And I feel like whatever God is out there, he loves all his children, no matter what country or religion they're in. So that's just kind of how the creator works for me.
So I see that you have your book behind you. Tell us why you decided to write it and what it kind of entails.
All right. Well, I guess why I decided to write it is because several people told me I should write a book when they kind of knew my life story, dealing with the childhood trauma and tragedy, and then 20 plus years using drugs and alcohol to escape pain and negative feelings, and then getting sober, and then, ending up doing all the things I've done in sobriety. I mean, because when I first got sober, I just prayed to God. I was like, God, just help me get sober so I can be a good father and husband and, like be a dependable worker who shows up for work on time and does a good job. I had no idea it was going to lead me into this marathon running and triathlon, the marathons I've done since then. Those are just like benefits, and in the 12-step program, they say, if you get sober, that these promises will come true and you'll be amazed beyond your wildest dreams. Because I know when I first got sober, I never didn't even think about trying to run a marathon or doing these other races I've done. I just kind of fell into it once I started, getting into exercise and fitness. So they're just bonuses.
One thing that in your bio stuck out to me is that you had 2 major knee surgeries in your 20s, and then you went on to do all this after the fact. You talked about hitting 250. I hit 245. I dropped from 245. I got all the way down to 206, and I think I'm now like at 225 or 223. And I'm working again back to get lower. But I've also had like 4 knee injuries. And 2 years ago, I had knee surgery, which was like April 2019. And, I'm still not fully recovered. So I'm trying to, how do I get myself back in position to physically be more active and trying to come back from an injury? Because my insurance has paid everything, unless if I go back and get another MRI to see why I can't squat or why I can't do some of this stuff, there's no other options but to just live with it. And so I'm trying yoga to help strengthen and stretch and move. I'm trying different things. So how did you overcome severe injuries, severe surgeries to become a triathlete, 12 Ironmans? I mean, good gosh.
That's a good question. I can tell you from my experience, I'm not exactly sure what kind of knee injuries you had, but my knee injuries at age, I was a basketball player for a long time, since middle school. And both my knee injuries happened playing basketball. At age 22, I did my left knee, and age 27, I did my right knee. And both times I tore my ACL completely, and I tore like half my meniscus. So when they went in and did the surgery, they removed a huge portion of my meniscus, and they reconstructed a new ACL ligament, threw a couple screws in there to hold that sucker in place. And at age 22, I didn't have kids yet. I was just kind of substitute teaching, and I had plenty of time to do all the physical therapy. They said to do it like 3 to 5 times a day. I did my physical therapy sessions, or 3 to 5 times a week. I did it, like, no, it was, the exercise 3 to 5 times a day. I was doing them like 5 to 7 times a day. I was like a bandit, because I was determined to be back out on the basketball court. They said it would take 6 months, and I did everything they said. And 6 months later, I was back out on the basketball court. But, and it felt a little different. I couldn't jump as high, but, I was out there doing it. And the same thing happened at age 27. But at this point, I'm much further along in my drug and alcohol use. And I have 2 young kids, and I'm working, and I just didn't have as much time to do the physical therapy. So I barely did, maybe 3 times a week. And my right knee never quite healed as good as the left knee because I didn't take the physical therapy seriously enough. So my message, and they recommend all this physical therapy, and they say to do it, 5 to 7 times a week or a day. Do it at least as much as they say. Don't skip out, because the physical therapy is really important. And the other thing is, I kept playing basketball till about age 35. And then it just got to the point where most of the meniscus was gone. And anytime I was doing kind of heavy jumping, stopping, or any quick turning, I was just starting to get really bad arthritis pains because, there wasn't much cartilage and meniscus left in there. That was also kind of what led me to doing other sports besides basketball, which is when I got into swimming and biking, which are more low impact. And I got back into running. People are like, how can you run with your bad knees? I'm like, I can jog in a straight line for a long time. It's only with these bad knees of mine, if I try to do a quick turn right or quick turn left and all the kind of movements you would do in football or basketball where you stop it and starting really fast, quick turning, that kind of stuff, that lateral torque really hurts my knees. But just jogging in a straight line, basically longitudinal motion, doesn't really hurt it. Maybe the first mile they're a little stiff, but then once the muscles warm up, the joint expands a little after the first, second mile, and then I just kind of cruise and don't even really notice anymore. After some of my really long runs, my knees are sore and I have to ice them, but that's actually normal for a lot of ultra runners when you're running more than 26 miles.
Man. So what advice would you give to someone who is wanting to just grow from where they're currently at in life, whatever position that they may be in, to whether it's going from couch potato to, just being physically fit, from, struggling with addiction to healing, or bipolar to medicine? What advice would you give to someone who's needing to make a change but not sure how to do it?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do. I know through my therapist, he told me there's the 3 A's to basically solving a problem: awareness, acceptance, and action. So if you have a problem or something in your life you want to change, there's a character defect, something's wrong with you, whatever it is, first you got to be aware of it, because a lot of people got to snap out of the denial. And then you have to accept it. And once you accept it, then you can actually start working on taking action or making an action plan. The other thing I've learned in one of the 12-step fellowships I go to is basically focus on what your vision for things are. So if you have a goal that you want to set, start doing some journaling and write down, what it is. Like for me, when I weighed 250 pounds, I hated being over 200 pounds. So, I wrote down that I wanted to be back down to 185, which was how much I weighed my senior in high school. So I just, charted out what I would need to do. The first thing I did on January 1st, 2009 is I went out and ran a mile. Because when I ran in high school and track, the 1 mile and the 2 mile were my main events. And I used to be able to run, in high school, a sub 5-minute mile. But when I weighed 250 pounds and was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, I had to walk a lot, and it took me 12 minutes to do that mile. And at first I was pretty sad and depressed about it, but then I got really angry about it. I'm like, you used to be able to run sub 5-minute miles. We're going to try and get back, a lot closer to that, and 6 months later, I was back down to 6-minute miles. I never got back to that sub 5, but, that's still much faster, pretty good. Most people can't run a 6-minute mile in America anyway, because we got a lot of overweight people. And so, my big thing was I just,
dude, I can't even do a 14-minute mile right now. I'm just being honest.
Okay. Hey. Well, the big thing is to start where you're at. Maybe your goal is to get down to just a 10-minute mile. What's it going to take? If your knees are healthy enough. I mean, for you with your knee
Yeah.
problems, I would suggest the yoga, the aqua aerobics, swimming, low impact stuff for now, elliptical, and do as much of that kind of stuff you can as the knee will tolerate it. Because there's lots of alternative exercise that people can do if they do have major joint injuries that are more
Yeah.
low impact.
So, Tim, tell us where people can find more about who you are and more about your book and can connect with you.
Yeah, thanks. They can find more about me at my website, ultratimdavis.com. It's got all my social media links on there, and I maintain a weekly blog on there. And my book is available on Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, and a few other ones. And it's available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook, which I like audiobooks because I'll listen to those while I'm out running and cycling, so I can kill two birds with one stone.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Tim, I like to end each interview with the same three questions. And so I'm going to ask you these. In terms of negative self talk, what are you currently struggling with? What is your current lie you're telling yourself?
All right. I guess occasionally I tell myself that I'm not good enough, that I can do better. I think I've done that my whole life. But what I'm doing for 2021 is for every negative thought I have to think of 3 positive thoughts. So, because being bipolar, and I think just being human, we all can fall into negative thinking and negative self-talk. So when I have these negative thoughts go through my head, I'm like, all right, there's that thought. Now it's time to think 3 positive things or 3 things I'm grateful for, try and turn around.
What brings you peace?
What brings me peace is having time with my family, going to 12-step meetings, doing meditation and breathing, and regular exercise.
What's the best decision you've ever made?
To get sober and work through all 12 steps so I can turn my life around.
Awesome. Tim, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Evan. This was awesome.